Make sure your insurance doesn't come up short. Get gap cover with ALA. For more information, follow the links in the description. Hello everybody. Today on the channel I've got a car that to some will mean absolutely nothing and to others everything. This is a 1982 Ford Granada. And I've got to say, I'm kind of falling in love with it. Now, help me out people, when I do videos like this, very often they don't get great views. And that doesn't bother me because I just love making them. But if you want to see more of them, there's one thing you can do that'll be a massive help. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button because it will tell me that you love this video and you want to see more like it. So if you haven't done it already, please do. And now, let's talk about this car. So, just in case you're one of my younger viewers and you've heard of the Granada but aren't quite sure what it is, this is the precursor to the Mondeo, a car in production from 1972 to 1994, split across 3 different generations. The first and second were fairly closely related, but the third was distinct enough that outside of the UK, it was often badged instead as a Scorpio. And as somebody who grew up in the 1990s, I do remember the final generation of the Granada. I think my mum's dad actually had one for a little bit before replacing it with a Cavalier. And at that point in time, it was a car that felt much older than it actually was. The all-new Mark I Mondeo paving the way for the next 2 decades of Ford product. And unlike smaller models such as the Escort and Fiesta, the Granada never sold in quite the same quantity. This was in 1979 Britain's 7th best-selling car. However, that I think did help to lend it a bit more of a special aura compared with those. And for this car's owner Mark, the Granada holds a very special place in his memory, for it was a car very much like this, a Mark II, which is the first car he remembers his father coming home with from new. And so, from that very day, he has been not just a Granada fan, but a Ford fan too. Over the subsequent decades, having owned many of them, including some 7 different Granadas, although there was a near quarter-century gap between his last one and this. And to explain exactly what this is, we have to go back to the beginning. The first Granada landed in 1972. It was Ford's executive saloon and lasted until 1977. And as was typical for Ford of the day, the early car came with not just a variety of different engines and trims, but body styles too. So you could have a 2-door saloon, a 2-door coupe, a 4-door saloon, and an estate. The engine range was a then frankly bewildering mixture of Essex engines, named for the fact they were built over at the Dagenham plant, and those made in Germany at the Cologne factory. In fact, for the Mark I, not only were some of the engines built in Britain, so were the cars. However, by the time of the Mark II, which landed in August of 1977, UK production had stopped, all cars now being manufactured in Germany. There were naturally a number of both cosmetic and mechanical changes for the Mark II, but by and large it is very much a facelift of the same car. To the extent that for the estate, they simply took the Mark II front end and grafted it on a Mark I body. The engine range was also rationalised, and depending on where in the world you were, you could have either a 1.6 or 2-litre Pinto Straight 4 as your base model. Some were also built with a short-lived V4, and then you had a selection of now exclusively German-built V6s. 2-litre, 2.3-litre and 2.8. The latter available either with carburetors, as we have here, or fuel injection. And yes, I know, it says 2.8i on the back, but that's just because it looks cool. And I kind of approve of that sort of thing, because it's a very period-correct thing to do. In 1981, the car was facelifted, and this particular example rolled out the factory gates a year later in 1982. It is a Ghia X trim, one of the highest available, and comes with a very impressive equipment list, including electric and heated seats, though fabric. They did later do a leather for the Ghia X Executive, which then dropped the heating. You've got an electric sunroof, electric windows all round, electric mirrors, both right and left. You've even got a trip computer and, are you ready, air conditioning. This also joins now standard fit safety belts all around and power steering. All of the controls are very 1980s, but they actually feel okay, they work quite well. There's no play in any of the stalks. It's all very nice, this. The seat's reasonably comfortable. It's tilted a little far back for my liking, but that is something you can easily fix. I also got to give this car bonus points because not only does it have air conditioning, it really works. And with summers like these, it's little things like that that'll make a car like this that bit more usable. That engine up the front makes around 130 horsepower and sends it all to the rear wheels via here, the optional 3-speed automatic gearbox. The default choice would have been a manual, either a 4 or 5-speed, depending on the engine, but this, the higher trim, larger engined car, was aimed at your executive buyer, and so the automatic was a fairly popular option. Mark acknowledges the fact that many people now do like to fit manual gearboxes, but for him, this suits the character of the car, and to be honest, I kind of agree with him. This is clearly not the sort of car you want to thrash down a country lane, like that Fiesta RS 1800 that I got to sample a few weeks ago. Instead, this is something to take it easy in. I've got to say, I'm really enjoying this. And today I got to experience something that happens very rarely, but when it does, it's quite important. You see, as somebody that grew up in the 1990s, I was born in the end of the 80s, cars like this, they were around. You didn't see them all that often, but when you did, they tended to be fairly dog-eared, not particularly well cared for, and they were the sort of thing you looked at and went, ugh, oh dear. And you assumed, sometimes correctly so, that people bought them simply because they were cheap. It was therefore very, very difficult for somebody like myself to wonder why it is that anybody would ever lust after a car like this. Today, seeing this now freshly restored Granada roll into the car park, looking resplendent in its imperial red paintwork, I have to say I took a moment and just went, wow, that looks absolutely stunning. And I was given just a tiny glimpse of what Mark must have felt on that day over 40 years ago when his dad came home with this. The sense of pride he must have felt. I know it well. Maybe these days it's something that doesn't happen all that often, but for me, I think I may be one of the last of that generation where Dad's new car day was a bigger day than Christmas or your birthday. This was a huge deal. I remember one day walking half a mile away from home just to be able to see Dad as he went past in his then new Jaguar S-Type. And up until I saw the car, I had absolutely no idea what it was that he was bringing home. As far as I was aware, it was just a Chinese takeaway, which is already quite exciting, but to then see Dad in his new Jag, happy memories. But in the cold light of 2025, what is the Granada like? Well, the first thing you notice is the fact it's still a relatively large car. Not anywhere near as big as the modern day equivalent, which in BMW terms would be something like a 5 Series, but at 4 3/4 meters long and just shy of 1.8 meters wide, it's not small. Cuts a fine figure too. This is the 4-door saloon, as I'm sure you've already noticed. With this body style, the 2-door saloon was still available, as was the Estate, the Coupe having been discontinued. The gearbox is very much of the time, so each shift is delivered not particularly smoothly, and you're well aware of when it has changed. Despite having only the 3 ratios to choose from, it is very keen to get into third fairly quickly, and so by the time you're at 30 or 40 mile an hour, it's already there. The engine too is not exactly a powerhouse, though I think part of that might be on account of the gearbox. So, in the name of science, I'm going to turn it around here, lock it into one of the lower gears, and see what it's got when you want to go a little bit quicker. Visibility naturally is excellent, as it always is with older cars. A, B and C pillars, paper thin, lots of glass everywhere, and it goes quite far down too. Alright, foot down, and I mean, yeah, it does go. Actually, when you do then pop it into second, it changes pretty responsively. Third, it leaves, and yeah, you can get up to the speed limit quick enough, but in truth, 50 mile an hour or so, this car feels fairly happy at. Now, the turn in is actually a little keener than I might expect, but that's because I didn't expect anything of it. As you can probably tell, the suspension is fairly soft. There's still a little bit of patter that comes through it, but overall I'd say it's doing the job of being a luxury executive car fairly well. When this was built, the motorway network existed, but was nowhere near as large as it is, and so a lot of driving would have been done on roads like this, for which it feels very well equipped. Brakes actually work okay. They're discs at the front, drums at the back. Another item worth talking about, the tyres. With this car, you had a selection of 3 different options. This originally came on a set of 14 inches. Beyond that, you could then get 15s. However, the top option was Michelin TRXs, the metric tyre, which was becoming quite popular in the 1980s. And I've no doubt at least 1 or 2 owners would have told people that their new Ford has those same fancy Michelin metric tyres as the Ferrari of the day. The downside of this is that today, sometimes these tyres can be hard to get. For example, there is one particular tyre for a Ferrari 512 that hasn't been produced for over a decade. Happily, you can still get these. And the wheels, Mark was able to pick up for the princely sum of 25 quid. The appropriate Michelin tyres, courtesy of the good people at Longstone, £1,400. Yeah. Meaning, this car costs more to put tyres on than a Ferrari F12. And the fuel economy isn't exactly stellar either. There is a trip computer over here, and it is giving me numbers, though none of them are particularly good. This car delivering maybe at best somewhere in the 20s mpg, meaning it's just as thirsty as a 911 Turbo, a Nissan GTR, or certain Ferraris. And that is one of 2 reasons this car was given its name, Betty. The first being that Mark felt this is a grandmother's car, and his grandma was called Betty. Funnily enough, so was mine. And the other is a reference to that famous First Lady, who also had a bit of a problem with the demon drink. Although, other than a couple of squeaks from the gearbox and I think the fan for the aircon, it's actually pretty pleasant in here. Really enjoying my time. The power steering also is fairly nicely weighted. Those who've been unfortunate enough to experience really early power steering systems would be quite impressed by this. Some of them, they just went a bit too far, and the cars had absolutely no feeling in the wheel whatsoever. This definitely does. But at low speeds, it's still easy enough to maneuver. You can also see basically all of that bonnet, which is nice and squared off, making the car very, very easy to place. You've got a decent amount of room in the back for passengers, and the boots are pretty good size too. You may have noticed the aftermarket subwoofer in there, and that joins up front a period-looking, but actually very modern, Blaupunkt Bremen head unit. And that is because Mark wants to use, drive, and enjoy this car. And for that, I salute him. I love seeing that. People who've gone to all this time, hassle and effort building the car of their dreams and then don't lock it away. Gets a lot of admiring glances, this thing too, I can tell you. Though, when he picked it up last year, it was nowhere near as good looking as this. Now, his dad's one was not in the same colour. It was instead in one called graphite. But this Imperial Red, I think, suits it perfectly. And though when he got it, at first glance, it didn't appear too bad, as soon as they started taking panels off, they realised it really was. He was amazed that the wings were even still on the car. That's the extent of it. Getting certain parts can also be difficult, but I really love the attention to detail that Mark has had with this build, even going as far to recreate the number plates of the Ford dealer where he lived. The little Hella fog lights at the front too, replacing the Ford ones, which unfortunately broke, look absolutely perfect. A lovely little period touch. And he was unsure as to whether to leave the covers on or not, but I actually think they look great with them on. It's just a real nice old school 70s, 80s thing. And what many might find particularly interesting is the fact this actually replaced a Cosworth. He had a Sierra Sapphire, which today is a car that has become a real collector's item. The thing is though that the Sierra never held quite the same regard in his mind as the Granada, and you do have to be realistic about how much a car is actually worth. For him, the Sierra, it just wasn't worth the money, but a Granada today, even a particularly good one, still isn't worth masses. Low-end examples start at just a few £1,000s, with nice, high-end, well-restored examples going for between 20 and 30. And though I'm sure there'll be those that absolutely balk at the idea of paying that for an old Granada, the truth is, to get a car into that kind of condition now will have likely cost at least that over the years. And so, though this is another car that just isn't for me, because it doesn't have any nostalgia for me, I am so grateful to have been given the chance to drive it. Like that little Fiesta RS the other day, it's helping give me a real picture of what it is that made people fall in love with Ford. And so, if you've got another item from the Blue Oval that means a lot to you and you'd love to see it shared with other people, please do get in touch. My email address is in the description down below. It's talk@jayemm.com. Likewise, if you're a Vauxhall man or woman, please do get in touch. If you've got a car for me to drive, I'd love to hear from you. But for now, all that remains to be said is a big old thank you to Mark for bringing his delightful car out, and to you for watching. Don't forget to like, comment down below, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you for the next one. Bye bye.